This is not the story of a stupid rich man who randomly wandered into a battlefield. This is the story of Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the richest and most powerful men in Rome, trying to buy the one thing Roman politics would not simply sell him: a myth.
Net worth is not legacy. Horrible news for rich people, excellent news for narrative structure.
But to understand why Crassus chased that myth all the way to Parthia, we cannot start with Parthia. We have to start with the Rome that made him. Crassus came of age as the Republic was learning a very dangerous trick. Political arguments could be settled by armed men. Starting in 91 BCE, Rome fought the social war against its Italian allies. The issue was citizenship, rights, status. Basically the question of who got to be inside the Roman machine instead of crushed under it. Rome eventually granted citizenship broadly, but then came the Roman part, arguing over how much that citizenship should actually matter. At the same time, there was a massive eastern command available against Mithridates of Pontus, the kind of war that could make a Roman commander rich, famous, and politically radioactive. Sulla had the command. Marius wanted it. A tribune named Sulpicius passed a law transferring it to Marius. Legally, the command was gone. Then Sulla did something that changed Roman politics forever. He marched his army on Rome. This was not normal. Roman generals were not supposed to use their armies as a customer service escalation department against the capital.
Rome clicked "I agree" on an update that said armies may edit government.
Sulla reversed the political moves against him, forced enemies like Marius into exile, and then left Italy to fight Mithridates, which left Rome in the very healthy position of having just watched one general seize the city, then leave a bunch of furious enemies behind. Crassus' father was Publius Licinius Crassus, and he was not a minor background dad placed there by the writers, so the protagonist can have trauma. Publius had been consul in 97 BCE. He had served as censor in 89. He had commanded in Spain and received a triumph. Plutarch says the family lived in a relatively modest shared household, with Crassus and his brothers raised around discipline, family structure, and elite expectations. So Marcus did not grow up as some random goblin counting coins in a basement. He grew up in a house where public office, military reputation, and Roman honor were real family objects. There were brothers too. One, also named Publius, seems to have died earlier in the social war. Another, Lucius, would die in the next wave of Roman political violence. By the time Marcus Crassus became an adult, Rome was not just a place where ambition happened. It was a place where ambition killed relatives. In 87 BCE, while Sulla was away in the east, the two consuls were Lucius Cornelius Cinna and Gnaeus Octavius. Cinna pushed for the new Italian citizens to be distributed more equally into Rome's voting tribes. Octavius opposed him. The argument became street violence because late Republican Rome had the conflict resolution skills of a burning tavern. Cinna was forced out of Rome. The Senate stripped him of office, illegally according to many modern readings, and declared him a public enemy.
So the Constitution still exists, technically, but it is now being interpreted by men loading javelins.
Then Marius came back. Marius had been exiled by Sulla. Now he joined Cinna. Together they gathered forces and moved against Rome. Rome was besieged. Armies maneuvered outside the city. Food pressure mounted. Senators negotiated. Soldiers defected. The Republic looked less like a constitution and more like a hostage situation with marble columns. And this is where Publius Crassus comes back into the story. Appian places Octavius, Crassus, and Metellus near the Alban Mount, watching events as Cinna advanced. That means Crassus' father was not politically invisible. He was a senior Roman figure associated with the side trying to resist Cinna and Marius. Eventually, Rome came to terms. Cinna entered as consul. Marius and the exiles were recalled. Then the purge began. The sources do not agree on every detail. They give us ancient accounts written through politics, memory, and revenge. So the safe version has to hold two things at once. Plutarch says that when Cinna and Marius got control, their enemies were killed. And among those killed were Crassus' father and brother. Appian gives an even more brutal version. Crassus' father was pursued with a son. To prevent that son from being captured, the father killed him first, and then the pursuers killed the father. That son is usually understood in this context as the brother who dies in the purge. But the important safe point is this. Marcus Crassus' father and brother were destroyed in the factional revenge that followed Cinna and Marius taking Rome.
This is the part where the conspiracy board stops being funny and starts being evidence.
Other prominent enemies were killed too. Ancient accounts talk about heads displayed in the forum. Modern caution says later sources may exaggerate the scale into propaganda, but this was still targeted political killing at the top of Roman society. For young Marcus, the nuance probably did not make it feel safer. His father was dead. His brother was dead. The winning faction controlled Rome. So Marcus ran. Plutarch says Crassus fled with 3 friends and 10 servants to Spain, where his father had once served and where the family had connections. He did not stride into exile like a grand hero. He hid. A local supporter, Vibius Paciacus, helped him. Crassus and his small group hid in a cave near the sea. Supplies were brought quietly. Questions were not encouraged. He stayed hidden for 8 months.
8 months in a cave. Batman had gadgets. Crassus had 10 servants and a political weather app stuck on murder. Nen diorcast motaxier.
That is a very different origin story from greedy rich man wants more money. This is a young aristocrat learning that status is not safety. Family name is not safety. Office is not safety. And being on the losing side of Roman politics can get everyone around you erased. When the political weather changed, Crassus came out. He gathered men, moved through Spain, and eventually joined Sulla, the man whose enemies had destroyed his family. That is not random. If Cinna and Marius taught Crassus what losing looked like, Sulla offered the opposite lesson. Win, and the world gets repriced. When Sulla came back and won in 82 BCE, Rome swung the other way. Prescriptions, confiscations, property of enemies sold off. Crassus was very ready to buy. Plutarch says the largest part of his fortune came from fire and war. Public disasters becoming private assets. The sources even give him a bad reputation under Sulla. One story says he had a man proscribed without Sulla's orders just to get the property. Sulla supposedly stopped using him for public business after that. Whether every detail is fair or moralized, the arc is sharp. Crassus survives one faction's purge, joins the faction that wins the counter-purge, and learns to convert political violence into material power. That does not excuse him. It explains the system he mastered. And then there were fires. Rome burned constantly. Buildings were crowded, badly planned, and often waiting for one lamp to ruin everyone's week. Plutarch says Crassus bought houses while they were burning, and the houses next to them because terrified owners sold cheap. He owned hundreds of skilled enslaved workers, architects, builders, managers, and used that workforce to rebuild and manage property.
Crassus did not invent disaster capitalism. He did arrive early enough to demand founder equity.
So when we say Crassus was rich, do not picture one pile of coins. Picture a machine, property, debt, enslaved labor, political access, and a talent for standing near catastrophe with a purchase agreement. But he was not only feared, he was useful. Plutarch says he kept his house open, lent money to friends, worked hard as an advocate, prepared even for small cases, and greeted ordinary Romans by name. That made him popular. It also made him dangerous, because a favor from Crassus was still a string, and Rome was becoming a city made of strings. Then there was Pompey. Pompey had military glamour early. Sulla honored him. People called him Magnus, the Great, while Crassus was still building influence through money, law, favors, and presence.
Pompey had a nickname, victories, and main character lighting. Crassus had a diversified portfolio and the haunted eyes of a man losing the poster war.
Crassus did not vanish. He became powerful in the city. Pompey could be away winning glory. Crassus was at Rome, available, useful, and impossible to ignore. In later years, he even helped Julius Caesar with money when Caesar needed it. Before Caesar became the man everyone had to deal with, Crassus was one of the men who made dealing possible. So Crassus was not less important. He was important differently. Then came Spartacus. The revolt became terrifying. Roman forces had failed. The Senate needed someone serious, and Crassus got the command. This is where the lazy version of Crassus breaks. He was not just rich. Against Spartacus, he was harsh, disciplined, organized, and effective. When a part of his army fled, he revived decimation, executing 1 in 10 from the guilty unit. Ancient, brutal, and not exactly a morale pizza party. Then Crassus built a massive trench and wall across the toe of Italy to trap Spartacus' army. It was huge. It was ugly. Spartacus eventually broke through it, so the wall did not end the revolt, but it worked well enough to make everyone involved miserable. Eventually, Crassus defeated Spartacus. This should have been the moment. Rome had been scared. Crassus had taken command. Crassus had won. Then Pompey arrived near the end, cut down fugitives from the revolt, and got to write to the Senate as if he had extirpated the war.
He joined the group project at Submit and put his name in 72-point font.
Crassus received an ovation, a lesser honor. Pompey, meanwhile, celebrated a full triumph for his victories in Spain. Not nothing for Crassus, but not the clean myth, not the giant public story he wanted. That wound matters, because Parthia later is not just greed. It is Crassus trying to get the ending Pompey kept stealing. First, the wound turned into proximity. In 70 BCE, Crassus and Pompey served as consuls together, two rivals sharing the top office while neither trusted the other's spotlight. They needed each other, hated needing each other, and kept orbiting the same prize, public legitimacy. A decade later, Caesar stepped into that unresolved rivalry and made it useful. Caesar understood the situation. Rome had 3 enormous power centers: Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar himself. Pompey had military prestige, Crassus had money and networks. Caesar had ambition sharp enough to cut the table.
So, an official 3-man government. No, worse, an unofficial one.
It was not an official office. It was power doing what power does when rules become decorative. Then Caesar's Gallic victories changed the emotional weather. Caesar was now generating the exact thing Crassus still lacked: giant, undeniable military glory. Plutarch says that alongside Crassus's old hunger for wealth, a fresh passion appeared. Trophies, triumphs, battlefield reputation. He did not want to be remembered as the banker of history's main characters. He wanted to be one.
And the red string from "I deserve a triumph" leads to "oh good, invade a serious empire, and sich gesehen nie saboteur."
At Lucca, Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus renewed the arrangement. Caesar kept Gaul. Pompey and Crassus ran for the consulship again. Then provinces and armies were assigned. Syria fell to Crassus. Crassus was thrilled. Ancient sources have him imagining victories so great that earlier Eastern campaigns would look like warm-up content. Parthia was not the limit of the fantasy. It was the doorway. Not everyone loved this. Ancient accounts say people objected because Parthia had not clearly attacked Rome. The tribune Attius even tried to stop Crassus with curses at the city gate. Crassus clicked it. At first, the campaign seemed to validate him. He crossed the Euphrates, took towns, left garrisons, and got just enough success to make the story feel like it was working. Then he wintered in Syria. Plutarch criticizes him for focusing on revenues, quotas, and temple treasure when he should have been preparing for the enemy. This is the old Crassus entering the wrong battlefield. The man who knew how to turn crisis into assets. Now treating an Eastern war like another system he could price and manage. Warnings kept arriving. Parthian envoys challenged the war. Cassius, remember that name because Rome will, urged caution. Armenia offered a route through rougher country, where cavalry would have less freedom. Crassus kept choosing the story he wanted. Forward, east, glory, triumph. Now, finally, Parthia enters the episode. Not as a loot pinata, not as a desert NPC faction. Parthia was the Arsacid Iranian Empire, a serious rival power with its own strengths.
I moved Rome off the center of the map. It screamed, but it survived.
The commander Roman sources call Surena was high-ranking, wealthy, young, and, according to Plutarch, one of the most capable Parthians of his time. Surena understood the matchup. Crassus's army wanted close engagement. Surena's force controlled range. At Carrhae, the final answer to Crassus' life arrived in tactical form. Rome brought disciplined infantry, cavalry, standards, and one very Roman assumption. Eventually, the enemy would stand close enough to stab.
Quick question. What if the enemy simply declines melee?
That was inconveniently Surena's plan. Horse archers stayed outside Roman reach, circled, shot, and kept choosing the distance.
So Rome brought premium stabbing to a no-stabbing event.
Exactly. If the Romans loosened or chased, heavy cataphracts threatened them. If they held tight, arrow volleys and dust kept grinding them down. The battlefield became a machine built from distance pressure, thirst, and panic.
Fine, hide behind the shields and wait for the arrows to run out.
That was the plan. Then the Parthians resupplied. Plutarch says camels carried fresh arrows to the horse archers, so the comforting part where the ammunition ends simply did not arrive. Then Crassus sent forward his son Publius. Yes, another Publius, because Roman names are a filing system prank. But not a throwaway commander. He had real experience under Caesar in Gaul. Crassus sent him to force contact. The Parthians pulled him away, surrounded him, and destroyed his force. And now the story echoes backward. Young Marcus had once survived his father and brother being destroyed by Roman factional violence. Now, old Crassus learned that his own son had been destroyed inside the campaign he had chosen. The legacy audition became a family catastrophe. The army broke down into retreat, confusion, and failed negotiations. Crassus died during a failed parley after the defeat. The exact mechanics differ across ancient accounts, so the script keeps the uncertainty visible instead of pretending the scene is settled fact. After his death, a later tradition claimed that molten gold was poured into his mouth as punishment for greed. It is famous, brutal, and suspiciously neat.
Historically uncertain, narratively, the branding department saw an open goal.
The point is not that Crassus was stupid. Stupid men do not become Crassus. The point is that his life taught him a pattern. Survive the violence, choose the winning side, buy the ruins, build the network, become too useful to ignore, and keep moving until power becomes safety. At Carrhae, that pattern failed. His death removed the third weight between Caesar and Pompey, weakening an already fragile balance. With Crassus gone, their rivalry sharpened, and the Republic stood one support beam closer to collapse. Crassus mastered the Roman game of money, favors, fear, property, and political leverage. Then he bet everything that the same game could buy him glory. And that is how one of Rome's richest men spent a lifetime building power, and still died chasing the one story he could not purchase.